Coming up this week on Sporting Journal Radio, some regulations have been rumored for a few months now about changes for non-residents going up to Manitoba. Well, those rumors...
So we want professional anglers and electricians and oil workers and stuff who earn the right to fish on the national stage to be able to fish at home.
I fish, I hunt, and always will. Broadcasting from the Prairie Sportsman Studios. Presented by OnX. Know where you stand with OnX. We're not just a radio show anymore.
Heck yeah.
This is Sporting Journal Radio.
That's right. Welcome to the show. I'm Brett Amundsen. A lot to get to this week. Geremy Olson is going to join us to talk about this fishing tournament fee potential change, the bill that's going on right now in North.
So today, Junior.
Yeah, I'm working on it. It's when you get into this political talk and bill language and all like that, it's above my pay grade. Like, it's just not even. It's people who ever write legal stuff should be just fired.
Boy, you're on fire with your words today.
Yeah,
right, legal stuff.
Right, legal stuff.
Nailed it.
Yeah, that's the way they should. All the bills should be. Don't drive fast.
Yeah, dumb it down.
Yeah. You know, that they do that so only lawyers can get the jobs, right? And politicians. So that none of us can understand it. There's a lot to get to. We're going to surf through a few things. What's going on in North Dakota? And then there's a couple of bills floating through legislature right now in Minnesota that we want to talk about regarding trapping and the size of traps, and also gun registrations. So some things you should be aware of that are being floated right now. We'll talk all about that. Plus have Joe Henry with the Lake of the Woods Fishing Report. Talk about a Rainy River fishing tournament and a new video on the Fish Hunt Forever YouTube channel. First, though, Dan, who are the sponsors this week?
Well, and there's some news out of Manitoba we should talk about,
that too.
that some people are up in arms about. So,
Thank you very much.
But first, we can thank OnX. Always know where you stand with OnX Hunt. Lake of the Woods Tourism. Lake of the Woods is the walleye capital. Plan a trip for the rest of this winter or the spring at lakeofthewoodsmn.com. Live Target Lures. Match the hatch at livetargetlures.com. Haybell Heights Campground and Resort. Book a trip to Devil's Lake in North Dakota. Learn more at haybellheights.com. Eau Claire Audio. Save your hearing in the field this spring while turkey hunting. Learn more at eauclaireoutdoors.com. Riverbend Resort at Lake of the Woods. Plan an ice fishing or spring Rainy River fishing trip or summer trip at riverbendresort.com. Ottertail Lakes Country. Find your inner otter at ottertaillakescountry.com. And Prairie Sportsman, the new season is underway. Episodes resume here in the next week or so, I think. In the meantime, you can watch episodes anytime at the Prairie Sportsman YouTube channel.
That's right. Make sure you check out the Fish Hunt Forever YouTube channel while you're there as well, too. We just put a new video on there of our ice fishing trip to Lake of the Woods. And some of the cool things, like we met some people that traveled a long ways to come ice fish at Lake of the Woods. Why did they do that? You'll find out in that video right now on Fish Hunt Forever. Of course, check out Sporting Journal Radio. You can watch this show on YouTube right there as well, too. That's Dan Amundsen. David Eckhart is with us, too. David, how you doing?
Doing good.
You ever hunt up in Manitoba?
No, I never have.
I know a lot of people from Minnesota traveled up there. We've obviously traveled up to Saskatchewan to do it, but some regulations have been rumored for a few months now about changes for non-residents going up to Manitoba. Well, those rumors have, for the most part, been confirmed. The province of Manitoba put out some new changes. There's a little bit of difference in what we've been hearing. There's now going to be a non-resident license draw for waterfowl hunters, and we've been told that that will be 100% successful, that draw. Now, the language that I'm reading states that it'll be 100% this first year, and then they'll look at it. I think it's given them some wiggle room. If they need to change things, they'll be able to. But what I've been told by various people is that that draw will always be 100% successful. That remains to be seen, but they're saying that ideally that'll always be successful. It's a way for them to track how many non-resident hunters are coming, where they're going, what they're doing, essentially just so they can keep a handle on the resource. Because what they want to do is protect resident hunters, protect some of the resources for residents. So they're going to limit non-resident hunters in Manitoba to only 7-day trips, 7-day licenses by draw. This year, at least, it'll be 100% successful. And then, or you can go through you can get a 7-day foreign resident migratory game bird license through a licensed Manitoba outfitter. or you can qualify as a land interest holder and receive a grandfathered foreign resident legacy migratory game bird license. So if you own some land up there, then you have a special license. Basically, they're trying to keep non-residents from leasing up all the land. Now, as you guys have noticed, I mean, we've talked about it here on this show quite a bit, that the number of waterfowl hunters seems to be dwindling. But when, like, especially on opener, what's it like out there when we go hunt out there?
It's busy.
It's crazy. There's people all over the place. So it's such a weird dynamic when you hear about a drop in license numbers, yet you always see a ton of hunters out there. So are they all just going to the same place? Are they all hitting community spots? Or, you know, I think what I see the most is if numbers are dropping, obviously the last couple of years with COVID, I think numbers either stabilized or went up, probably. But I think you see waterfowl hunters are getting, you know, the hardcores, the guys that'll always do it, that have always done it. They're the ones that are doing it the most and out there all the time, and they're probably the ones leasing up some of the land to protect. When you have a big investment like waterfowl gear, you want to have the most success as possible. And if you're spending a lot of money on gear, you're probably going to spend money on a spot to lease up if you have the opportunity as well, too. So what's happening, I think, is there may be fewer hunters because access is getting more limited on where they can go. And that, to me, limiting access is the number one reason why you see a decline in license sales. There are obviously other factors out there, but I think limiting access is number one. So what they're trying to do is stop the limiting of access for particularly Manitoba residents. So you can read all about the new regulations at sportingjournalradio.com. And they're also dropping the number of licensed outfitters in Manitoba for this. Like they're cutting like 2/3 of them out, because they either weren't using their tags or they weren't properly reporting non-resident hunter numbers. So they've got a smaller number of outfitters available for this. So they're going to protect the local economies, the local outfitters.
I don't think they're protecting the local economies by putting a restriction on non-resident hunters. Let's clarify that.
Yeah, that wasn't maybe the right word for it, but I think what they're trying to do is, when I say local economies, I meant it in a sense that the local businesses like a guide or outfitter, because they're giving them more business, probably, in the sense that you can't freelance as much as you used to be able to, theoretically. Although if they're going to do 100% draw, you could still go up there and freelance. You just can't do it for more than 7 days. So if you ever took more than one trip up there, you're probably going to be limited to one trip. But otherwise, you probably won't see a lot of changes. And realistically, how different is this than what you see in the Dakotas?
Right.
You know, it's pretty similar. You got the draw in South Dakota, and then you got the 2-week or so whatever restriction in North Dakota. So it's really not that different. It's a little unfortunate because when you do go as far as you go up to Canada, ideally you want to make it as long of a trip as you can, and maybe make multiple trips if possible. But
well, let's be real though. I comment below. I'd be curious to know how many people A, take a trip more than 7 days, B, take multiple trips to Canada. I mean, it's not, when you're
Probably
working a regular 9 to 5 days a week, that's not happening. You and I are fortunate enough to get to do that, but I mean, David, could you even do that?
Depending on the time of year.
Just fall? I mean,
Fall,
September,
no.
October?
No, that's why I've never gone to Canada. It's just never works out with harvest, and I've always wanted to, but.
And I agree with you, Dan. I think there's just a very select few that would have that ability, like us. We have the ability to go up there multiple times or go longer than that. So I don't know how big of a change it's going to be in Manitoba, but those are the new rules and restrictions. A lot of people were up in arms about it, and I think it's the small number of the hardcores out there that hunt all the time, hunt all season, take a lot of trips. You know, when you talk about diminishing license sales, I think where you're seeing the diminishing areas is the weekend warrior guys, the guys that don't have a lot of time to go. So when they finally do get a weekend to go or whatever, and they show up somewhere and there's already a guy there, or the land got leased up from underneath them. Now they're angry. They spent all that time. They got up early. They drove all that way. They don't get to hunt anymore. That's the guy that next time says, I don't know if I want to go.
Yeah. Well, do you want to fight crowds, or you can hop in a boat and go fish?
Yeah.
I've questioned that sometimes too, and I love duck hunting.
Right. And that's, this discussion is about Manitoba, but realistically, this could be about anywhere. You know, really, we could be talking about this in North Dakota, Montana, Saskatchewan, Minnesota, wherever. It's definitely an issue that needs to be addressed and looked at. And, you know, maybe just waterfowl hunters. It's just going to be it's not going to be a hugely participated event like it used to be, just because now it's a little more specialized, you know, almost like deer hunting in a sense, where guys are managing their own property. You have a lot less access to deer hunting land too, because guys are bow hunting and using trail cams and setting up refuges and limiting access to properties. So to me, access is the number one reason why you're seeing hunting license sales go down. More about that on our website. Also, just want to mention that the Spring Conservation Canada, snow, and Ross's goose seasons are not subject to the new regulations for foreign residents in Manitoba. So if you want to go up there in the spring and shoot Canada geese, I'm just going to let that one sink in for a minute. Because
I'm good, honestly. I don't know. I don't really need to do that.
Sounds fun.
Canada's
one time.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, you ask Corey Loeffler on his decoy strategy on that, at least before he ever done it. I don't know if he's actually gone or not, but before that season was a thing, he's like, I would take 1 century decoy and put it on a pond. Sounds like a blast.
So anyway, you can read more about that and get links to all the regulations at sportingjournalradio.com. And then there's a couple of other things I just wanted to touch on real quick. I know we're running out of time here, but there's a bill, HF 1299, going through the Minnesota legislature right now regarding trapping. Some changes in sizes of the traps that you can use. A person may not set, place, or operate except as a completely submerged water set, body gripping trap that has a maximum jaw opening when set greater than 4.5 inches measured from the inside edges of the body gripping portions of the jaws. And then there's a couple of other things on that you can read through on that. You can find all this stuff online. We'll link in the description. We'll put links to this stuff down there too. Also I think potentially some changes about if you end up killing a dog. I mean, really, these aren't anti-trapping regulations, right, David? I mean, this is more about protecting dogs.
Yeah, it's more about protecting dogs from what we've talked about.
That's always the toughest part, because especially when it comes from the Minnesota legislature, you always wonder if there's some anti-hunting, anti-trapping sentiment in some of this, and maybe there is some of that, but realistically, to me, I'm not anti-trapping at all, but I hunt with dogs all the time. And I just, especially if I hunt in an area where there's more trapping, more common, where trapping is more common, I worry a little bit about that.
Right.
But just got to be careful out there and educate yourself on how to remove your dog from a trap before you go hunting as well. There's another bill out there, SF 1723, and they're talking about registering guns, changing storage requirements, ban carrying firearms in certain places. They want to require liability insurance for individuals with a carry permit and individuals who own a firearm. They want to make you have a license to own or possess a firearm. They set up different firearm transfer requirements. There's limits the number of firearms that can be purchased within a 30-day period. Ban the open carry. Let us just be clear, we don't want to see gun violence. We're definitely against gun violence, but not happy with this bill and what it is. This is way too far. There's like 4 anti-gun bills in Minnesota right now. There's a red flag proposal. There's some universal background checks. They will criminalize you if you fail to report a lost or stolen firearm. There's a bunch of other stuff too. So there is one we're watching, SF 1723. We'll link to that down below as well too. And in the neighboring state, North Dakota, there is some things going on there with tournament license fee, tournament permit fee. What am I trying to say?
Today, Junior, again.
Tournament permit fee changes. Geremy Olson's going to explain. We had Greg Power. If you missed last week's show, go back and watch Greg Power from the North Dakota Game and Fish explain the Game and Fish Department side of things. And then Geremy, who has been involved in this discussion for about 12 years now, he testified. We're going to hear about his testimony coming up, and we'll get a Leg of the Woods fishing report in a week.
852 million acres of public land, 147 million private properties,
all in the palm of your hand.
The #1 hunting GPS app just got better. With hundreds of custom map layers, 3D and topographic maps, you can easily scout on the road or at home before you go. And now you can get important weather details, CWD detection, and even know what crops have been planted where. Get the most trusted hunting GPS app ever made. OnX. Know where you stand with OnX. It's ice fishing season and time to plan your trip to Riverbend Resort on Lake of the Woods. Stay at the Lakeside Resort along the Rainy River in one of their new cabins and enjoy delicious meals and hot or cold beverages in the Miles Lab Bar and Grill. Or stay in one of their comfortable sleeper houses on the ice, complete with a TV, stove, and lots of walleyes right beneath your feet. You also have the option of staying at their motel, the Walleye Inn, located in Baudette. Book your ice fishing trip to famous Lake of the Woods today at riverbendresort.com. That's riverbendresort.com. All right, now we're going to talk to Joe Henry from Lake of the Woods Tourism to find out what's going on up at Lake of the Woods. Joe, how you doing?
Hey, Brett. I tell you what, ice fishing's going on. I mean, we're holding ice, man. It's we're getting we don't have like bone chilling temps. We don't have 20 below or anything, but I mean, we got single digits during the evenings, and we're going into the teens during the day. I'm looking at the week ahead, and we got great weather for ice fishing. And I'll tell you what, if you want to get your last weeks of ice fishing, and we got resorts with houses out on the lake, whether it's a sleeper house or day house, we got availability. I tell you, the pike anglers have been doing really well the last few weeks actually, and so pike fishing's on right now. If you want to bring your own equipment up, or maybe you want to rent a house at a resort and do the pike fishing. A lot of our resorts will actually, if you talk to them, they'll place a fish house. You can stay nice and warm and watch flags out the window in some very, very good pike areas in that shallower water. So it's, fish houses can be overnight on the ice on Lake of the Woods through March 31st as we're border water. Our walleye and sauger season goes through April 14th. Pike season never closes. And of course, Brett, you can keep your perch, you can keep your eel pout, tullabees, things like that too.
Yeah, and you talk about the extended ice fishing season up there, and this year I think you're really getting your money's worth. I'd imagine there's really, it's no different than it probably was a couple of weeks ago up there. Lots of ice and probably still a fair amount of snow up there too. Oh yeah, it is. The conditions are really good. I mean, I always say you got to work through the outfitters and the resorts who have the ice roads and ice trails, because with literally Lake of the Woods, if you include the Canadian side, it's 1 million acres of water. There's 14,552 islands, and there's over 65,000 miles of shoreline. And, we do have moving water. The Rainy River feeds Lake of the Woods, and then ultimately that water is in the big basin. It's not moving so much because it's so big. But then once you get up towards the northwest angle where the islands begin, now you start getting the water more focused and more neck downs, and that water is moving through there. The water, for people that don't know, that water actually goes all the way up to Kenora, Ontario, and then there's a dam in Kenora, and then it goes through into the Winnipeg River, Lake Winnipeg, and then it actually goes all the way up to Hudson Bay up in Churchill, where the polar bears are. So our watershed really pushes a long ways. But again, ice conditions are really good right now, and it looks like we're going to have ice fishing through the end of March, which a lot of people are excited for. I say the end of March for fish houses being out overnight on the ice. A lot of the pike anglers love fishing the pike well into April. Heck, the walleye anglers don't do it as much just because I think they're just so used to ending in March. But, for some of the locals and people that have their own equipment stuff, man, I'll tell you, getting out there in April, if the ice conditions are still good, I mean, for walleye fishing, that can be just incredible. Yeah, well, if I remember right, last year when we were up there fishing the open water for the tournament, there were some guys doing some ice fishing in different places. There were, absolutely there were, yep. And again, it's one of those things where, I've known people that have actually, some years when the ice really goes out late, I know some people that have actually iced fish on the opening of fishing. Now, that is not real common, obviously, but in May, but this year, I don't think will be that year. This year seems to be pretty normal, but you'll still be able to get out there ice fishing, I think, in April. And I tell you, those pike already, those pike are going pretty darn good right now already, and it should only get better. Well, that's something that I would like to do up there one of these years, Joe, is we need to go up and film at a pike show. I would like to see a video of you racing Danny to a flag. And I just want to see if you still got those wheels, Brett, like you used to have, or if Danny's kind of can catch you on some of those. He thinks he can beat me. Have you ever done it? He probably can. Well, no, I don't think we ever had the race. I don't know.
One thing about it is, as you get older, you get a little wiser. Yeah, maybe you don't say anything, and you put some cleats on, and maybe put the better baits closer to you, and the flags and stuff. I know what I'm saying.
And I'm bigger and have no problem taking a guy out on my way to the
kicking
flag.
his ankle out.
Yeah. So, it's funny that you say that, because we filmed with Don Walrath for a Prairie Sportsman episode a couple of years ago, and we were having a little friendly competition about who was going to catch more trout, and she set some flags out. Well, all of a sudden she's like, I'm just going to go stretch my legs for a minute. We were in portables, and she hops outside the house, and I look out the window. I see her take off running through the snow, and she pulls up a rainbow on the flag, and I was like, that doesn't count. So then we had a big disagreement over whether or not flagged fish count in the contest or not. But she was so sneaky about it too, just like snuck out of the house and took off running. But,
stretch my legs, i.e. flags up.
Flags up, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, but that would be fun to do that up there, Joe. Catch some of those big fish, because man, I've seen some big pike come out of the ice up there this year already.
Oh, there's just some huge sleds. It's funny because I was talking to somebody who fishes Bostic Bay area a lot, and they said normally that there's enough ice in Bostic Bay that there just isn't much water under there, and there's not a lot of pike activity late in the season, like for February and that sort of thing. But this year, there was more water under the ice, and those pike were in that bay. So the notorious March spots for pike were actually kicking some pretty nice fish out all winter long. So I tell that to people that are really avid pike anglers. You don't have to wait till March to ice fish pike on Lake of the Woods. I mean, you can be getting out there, and those pike are eating all winter long. I mean, they love that cold water, obviously, and there's some great opportunities all winter long. And, the other thing, too, is, you're fishing those shallow water pike spots. There's so much water to fish. I mean, it's not like you're fishing structures. So it's really picking an area out or a depth out and going out there and spreading out some flags, and it's not like everybody's concentrated in one area. You don't have to be.
And there's a few guys offering guided pike fishing up there?
There are, yeah. So some people offer guided pike fishing, but really a lot of the resorts are real dialed in. They got some of their guides at the resorts or some of the outfitters that really understand pike well, and they're like, yeah, no, I'm mainly fishing walleyes right now, but if you want to come fish pike, we could get you a house and some real good pike spots, and you can just sit in the house and watch flags and play cards and whatever, you know what I mean? But it's kind of nice that way, because if you don't want to bring up all your own equipment, don't know where to go or how to do it, they can really help you with that stuff. A lot of them provide tip-ups. Otherwise, bring your own tip-ups. You just got to communicate with each resort and outfitter before you come up to find out exactly what you need and what they provide.
Joe, just anecdotally, we've had a lot of conversations about that here, just our group of friends down here. And the cost of hauling like an ice castle, it's about a 6-hour drive for us, of hauling up our own stuff and the wear and tear on all the gear, the amount of fuel you're burning, pulling something up like that, you're actually, at times, you could actually be saving some money by going through a guide up there and gaining that local knowledge at the same time.
Exactly. It kind of depends on, how many days you fish throughout the year. And I think every time is different, right? But no, you're exactly right. It's the same thing with open water fishing when we come to the open water season. I was just at the Sioux Falls sports show here this last week and talked to a lot of people. And, some of the people like, yeah, I could pull my boat up there. Maybe I will someday. But I think the first time I come, I put a pencil to it. You can jump on a charter very reasonably. Rods, reels, tackle, bait, everything's provided for you. I'm going to jump on a charter. It's pretty reasonable and just get the lay of the land. Then what I'll do is I'll decide down the road if I want to bring my own boat up at the next time or if I want to continue going on a charter because it's just so easy. It's the same concept, right?
Well, Joe, if people want to get a trip planned through a resort like that or maybe do some late season ice fishing, what should they do?
You know what? All of our outfitters, all of our resorts, all the information you need about either ice fishing or open water fishing is on our website, and that is lakeofthewoodsmn.com.
Come ice fish the famous waters of Minnesota's Lake of the Woods, the walleye capital of the world. Experience full-service resorts featuring heated fish houses, ice transportation, meal plans, and sleeper house options. From the Northwest Angle to the South Shore, Rainy River, and Baudette, the Midwest's #1 ice fishing destination. Walleye, sauger, perch, and northern pike. Minnesota's Lake of the Woods, best fishing anywhere. For more information, log on to lakeofthewoodsmn.com.
Live Target, the leader in Match the Hatch, is back with new lures that also match the action. Introducing the Live Craw. The Live Craw is irresistible to bass, walleye, and other freshwater species. FTech's winner, the Ultimate Frog, looks and acts just like a swimming frog. With an exposed Ultra Point mustad hook and replaceable legs, the Ultimate Frog has 2 styles, 2 sizes, and 8 colors. And iCast and FTech's winner, the Live Shrimp, mimics a fleeing shrimp for saltwater anglers. Coming soon from Live Target.
All right, this is Sporting Journal Radio. I'm Brett Amundsen. Thank you for tuning in on this station on the network by demand at sportingjournalradio.com, or maybe you're watching this on YouTube. Thank you very much. We had a spirited debate last week here on, spirited debate. I don't know, we had an interesting discussion last week here on the radio show. Dan Amundsen and David Eckhart with us here too, and it was about a topic that was brought to my attention, and then I know some people over in North Dakota. I reached out to Game and Fish. I ended up doing an interview with Greg Power, who has been at the heart of the topic on the Game and Fish side. And the person that brought this question to me is Geremy Olson, and he joins us now here on the show. Jeremy, how you doing?
Hey, I'm doing good, and thank you very much for having me on.
We're talking about a potential new fee structure for fishing tournaments in North Dakota. And I really hadn't been following it. I haven't lived in North Dakota for about 12, 13 years now, and I didn't really fish tournaments or anything while I was over there, so I wasn't really paying much attention to the tournament scene. And now this topic is really brewing currently. Right now it's at legislature, and apparently it's been going on for a few years. I didn't realize that, Jeremy, but this has been a topic that's been near and dear to you for a long time.
Yeah, I've been working on this for, I think, going on 12 years now. And I think what's important for everybody to understand is I'm not a tournament guy. I'm the kid that grew up camping 12 months out of the year in North Dakota, and my dad didn't fish, and so never had a fancy boat. Our first boat that we bought is the one I'm still using. It's a 16-foot bluefin with a 25-horse Johnson, and I fished my first tournament when I was in high school, which is a $5 entry fee ice fishing tournament, and I got $100 and thought that was kind of cool. And then, about 12 years ago, I started fishing some charity tournaments with my kids here in North Dakota, and that's my extent of being a tournament angler, self-taught angler. And so everything we're going to be talking about today is stuff I've learned in the last 12 years since I moved back to North Dakota in 2003, even though I was raised here.
So basically at the heart of the issue is that some fishing tournaments were paying more money than other tournaments, and the money wasn't necessarily going to what everybody thought it was going to. So explain to me what your opposition was to the way things were being done in North Dakota.
So to get there, we got to take a quick history lesson, and Mr. Power covered that pretty well in your last podcast. But for almost 40 years ago, some people wanted to have a governor's cup. And back then they set up a rule that you could keep 15% of the money as an organizer of a charity event. Only charity events were legal in North Dakota at the time. You had to pay a 10% conservation fee based on entry fees paid or participation fees for that tournament. And you had to give away 75% of the money to participants. And that rule has pretty much been unchanged with one exception since 1984. And that one exception is back in the 90s, the Pro Walleye Tour, PWT, came to North Dakota. And as is everywhere in the country, if you make it to a national championship, there's no entry fee. And a group of people were frustrated that the Pro Walleye Tour didn't have an entry fee to get around that's 10% conservation fee. So back in 1994, they put in a rule that said if there's no entry fee and you give away money or prizes, you have to pay a $10,000 conservation fee. And that's the way the rules are to this day. One of the sticking points was at some point in time in the 90s, a city and the Game and Fish negotiated a $5,000 cap. So from mid-90s until 2020, most tournaments in North Dakota were only paying $5,000 regardless of what those entry fees or that 10% would have been. So does that make sense as far as a history lesson on this?
Yeah, but was there something about that wasn't published? Like nobody knew that there was a $5,000 cap?
Yeah, most people didn't know there was a cap, partially because they didn't have to, they never ever got to that amount of money. But there's organizations in North Dakota who were paying anywhere from $2,000 to $4,500 over that cap. And you got a rough chart there. And what you see there is the numbers from 2022. And what you're seeing is the variations in fishing tournament fees by size of tournament. And so that's a huge variation there. And I think we actually have some more current numbers than that, Brett. And so in 2022, 0 to 50 tournaments, or 0 to 50 participants, there was 54 events in North Dakota that fall under that category. And that's 40% of all tournaments in 2022. And there was an $1,100 difference in the cheapest or permit fee and the most expensive. So that's where some of the rub came in, is there was no consistency on the impact to a fishery or a boat ramp or parking, but there's huge differences. And when you get into those numbers on the top end of that, or the bottom end of that graph that you were showing, there's a $9,000 difference between tournaments of 401 participants and greater.
And is that a lot of that has to do with higher entry fees?
Yeah, it's about entry fees. So the tournament that pays the most money in conservation fees right now in North Dakota is the Devil's Lake Ice Fishing Tournament, which is a fundraiser for the Devil's Lake Fire Department. And their entry fee is only $4, but they had close to 24,000 people pay a $4 entry fee. And so they have to pay $9,600 this year. In 2023, they paid $9,600 in conservation fees. And remember that 75% rule, they have to buy prizes or give away cash of 75% of all the money they raised. Now, where this gets a little crazy and where it doesn't make sense for just a citizen of North Dakota like myself, a volunteer firefighter, former volunteer firefighter, is 19,000 people never fished that tournament that Devil's Lake had to pay that conservation fee on. And so, and fire departments are a pretty important thing for us to support in North Dakota. And so is conservation money going to a boat ramp important? Yes. Nobody disagrees with that. Having the Devil's Lake Fire Department not be able to buy a new brush truck or outfit 10 people with fire gear, that's more important to me. And that's where the opposition to the current way of thinking is coming from.
And that conservation fee, that started because there was a big tournament in North Dakota in the 90s, and the locals were mad that all these pros were going to come and hammer the lake.
No, it was the first tournament ever is what started the conservation fee, and that's the North Dakota Governor's Cup. Prior to 1984, or in that area,
80s. Okay.
In the 80s, there was no tournaments in North Dakota allowed because that was gambling with the fish, according to the people at the time. I was in second or third grade, so I didn't pay a lot of attention to it back then. but that's where all this comes from is, and the opposition to our bill comes from what you were saying. There's three groups of people that are upset with the bill that we brought forward. And the one group of people is the people that don't want anybody from out of state coming and fishing on my lake, in my spot. So it's the not my spot, not my lake folks. There's a prejudice against out of state anglers in North Dakota, and where it manifests itself with the most harm is when we're talking about these conservation fees. The other group of people that's against this bill are the fishing clubs and organizations that are currently getting the money. And it's not the cities, but like we heard, most of these funds are pass-through funds. So if I hold a fishing tournament in Washburn, I have to write Game and Fish a check for that 10% for the tournament I would hold, and then Washburn gets the check back. And so if we're only giving the money away to get it back, and then there's some restrictions on that. So whatever we say to Game and Fish that money has to go for, that's what it has to go for. And it has to be part of a fisheries project. It has to be part, fish cleaning station, boat ramp access, something like that. And the reality is, when we were looking at what's the positives and the negatives to the way things are currently happening, there's way more negatives to the way things are happening. And I think one of the interesting stats here, let me grab, roughly 26% of groups in North Dakota that hold tournaments are outdoor clubs or sports clubs. And, people that support the Wild Turkey Federation want to raise some conservation dollars for turkeys. And there's pheasants. Pheasants for the Future was a group that was very huge for years. And the new bill allows 26% of roughly 26% of tournaments in North Dakota to keep 100% of their money for the conservation projects that they have. Ducks Unlimited can use that money for duck projects and stuff. Educational groups, student angling groups can keep 100% of their money for those conservation and education projects. And so it's one of the things that's kind of making me scratch my head is we worked long and hard over the last 4 or 5 years to come up with some legislation that didn't hurt the groups that were getting money currently, and right now they're getting 10%. Under the new law, they would have access to 100% of those funds.
So people that might lose out on this conservation fee money could potentially hold their own tournament to raise that money and maybe even raise more.
26% of these people already are holding their tournaments and have to give away 75% of their money.
Yeah.
So right now, and if what's the goal of your tournament? Well, our goal of our tournament is to just have fun and to bring in some money and give it out. And then you have that ability to do that. But if the goal of our tournament is to give rods and reels to kids, one of the tournaments that our family's involved in, because my kids own a fishing tackle company, is the Young Angler tournament that happens at Devil's Lake every year. That tournament, the sole purpose is to take 80 kids out fishing, give them rods, reels, and tackle, and teach them how to fish. And currently they're paying $600 in conservation fees to hold that tournament. And that's $600 that if it was not sent to Game and Fish and returned to the entity that, and it's a circle. So that money's given to Game and Fish. It goes back to a sports club in Devil's Lake, who gives it to the Young Angler tournament. And it's just this rotating $600 that could be going to tackle and rods and reels for these young kids that we want to get into fishing. And that's a lot of gear.
So this new bill, if it's not a nonprofit fishing tournament, 75% of the entry fee would still go back.
No, the new bill, with the amendments, originally the new bill said that 100% of money for charities, nonprofits could go there. One of the amendments and agreements is everybody agreed that it doesn't matter if it's a nonprofit or a regular tournament, they can handle how they're going to spend their money. And part of the reason for that is the goal is that nobody would make money on that 75%. The goal was that nobody would make money off of a fishing tournament. Well, most bigger tournaments where people are fishing for money are already giving out 75, 80%. And so, this allows those tournaments to actually give away 100% to the participants, if that's the purpose. A lot of convention and visitor bureaus they're not worried about making money on the tournament. They want people to come and buy gas and tackle and food and stay in a restaurant. And so, there's a huge economic impact to having these tournaments. And so by limiting these tournaments, the bigger tournaments from coming into our state, the economic impact is huge. And I guess that's what kind of blew this thing up, and the reason we're actually in the legislature is because 2 years ago during COVID, the North Dakota Game and Fish pulled that $5,000 cap that we were talking about earlier. And that made a tournament like the National Walleye Tour, the Masters Walleye Circuit, instead of those tournaments being a $5,000 tournament that Devils Lake, Garrison, or Bismarck had to pay for, because we should maybe hop into that just a little bit. People don't realize when you have a national event, it's a fishing event, it's no different than if we bring a concert or any other special event to our community. If you want the National Walleye Tour to come to your town has to pay, or a group of people need to get together and pay for them to come. So in Minnesota, that group has to pay $250 to have the National Walleye Tour at that event. In Wisconsin, it's $25. In Michigan, it's free. In South Dakota, it's free. In Iowa, it's like $25 or $30. You know, it's small amounts of money. If the national, yeah, you got the chart there, and it's really small amounts of money, correct? So the National Walleye Tour is having an event, their first event for 2023 in a week. And if that event were going to be held in North Dakota, it would be right now, from what we know, $29,900 for the permit fee.
Wow.
and what people don't understand is the anglers don't pay $29,900. The National Walleye Tour doesn't pay $29,900. Devil's Lake, Garrison, Beulah, Hazen, Williston, Bismarck have to pay that money. And you know, money's not running free in our country right now.
Yeah,
and so they don't have that money. And so it isn't practical for those things. So for all intents and purposes, 2 years ago, there became this ban on tournaments, national circuit tournaments. If you really want to get scary, then if we brought in a BASS Elite Series this year, it would be $54,000 just for the permit fee. And then South Dakota, it was free last year.
In South Dakota, it was free?
Yeah, and South Dakota doesn't have the permit. Everybody still has to get your local permits, you know, a use for, you know, if you're using a state park and those things. We're not talking about those things. We're just talking the permit fee for the tournament.
So I just want to back up, because am I looking at something that's outdated that says under Section 2, Fishing Contest Number 2, it says a minimum of 75% of any entry or participation fee paid by the contestants must be returned to the contestants as cash or cash equivalent merchandise?
Yeah, so that amendment in the House made an amendment to get rid of that across the board, and they got rid of the 15% that you could keep. And so right now, charity or regular, you know,
or regular can keep 100%.
Yeah, everybody can keep 100. That was one of the negotiations. The other negotiation was in the original bill. It was a $250 permit for a for-profit tournament, and it was $75 for a nonprofit, or up to. And the House of Representatives committee, the negotiations that happened between the Convention and Visitor Bureau's tourism and that committee agreed on a up to $2,500 permit for, and what they call out-of-state tournaments. And
how do they determine?
That's what we're all trying to figure out, because what truly is an out-of-state tournament, you know. In the National Walleye Tour and the Masters Walleye Circuit, 25% of those anglers are from North Dakota, and those are anglers that will never get to compete on their home water ever.
Well, I was going to ask you that, because in your testimony you said something about that, how the Century Code restricts North Dakota residents from competing here in North Dakota. Is that what you were referring to?
Yeah, so a great example is the AIM Weekend Walleye Series. They hold 5 events in Minnesota, 5 events in Wisconsin, and 5 events in North Dakota. Those 5 events in North Dakota, it's a 10% conservation fee for the entry fees. And for years, they were capped at that $5,000. They've paid more than that in the last couple of years, and before that. But then Minnesota, that's 5 times $250. In Wisconsin, that's 5 events times $25. And the way the AIM Weekend Walleye Series works is all of those anglers in 3 states are competing to be one of the top 10 in those 3 states to compete in a free national championship, where they're giving away $135,000 in cash and prizes, but there's no entry fee. And prior to 2020, that event was allowed to be in North Dakota. When they pulled the cap and went back, North Dakota Game and Fish wants AIM to pay $10,000 for that free event to be in North Dakota because of that rule from the 90s. So this is 2023 is the 4th year now that the national championship is not in North Dakota because nobody has this imaginary $10,000 for those anglers to compete in front of their home crowd. And I think that's sad. It doesn't affect me, but why should somebody who's competed and earned the right to compete at home not be able to compete at home? So that's one of the reasons for this bill. I was the tournament director for the AIM Weekend Walleye Series in North Dakota for a handful of years. But we lost so many anglers because nobody could compete at home. I lost my job because there wasn't enough anglers fishing in North Dakota to pay for me to be there. My sons who own the fishing tackle business, like I said, sponsor some of those anglers. And as sponsors of anglers, North Dakota anglers, they can't have their anglers fish on their home water for a national championship. And it breaks my heart as a resident that we're allowing that to happen in North Dakota. And that's why we brought this. That's another one of the reasons we brought this bill forward. Is it's not because we don't like conservation. We want kids to be able to fish high school events. We want professional anglers and electricians and oil workers and stuff who earn the right to fish on the national stage to be able to fish at home. And so that's why I spent 4 or 5 years writing House Bill 1538. And that's why we are where we're at.
And one of the other changes in the past, now any tournament had to pay that, right? But now if the entry fee is less than $50, or if there's fewer than 50 participants or 15 boats, if the participants are under the age of 19, or if it's an online tournament like a fish donkey tournament, not limited to a single body of water, then you don't need a permit?
Under the new rules, yeah. And the exemption for youth angling there is not for tournaments, it's for youth activities. So one of the things that's been kind of quirky in North Dakota is if you wanted to take 50 kids out and teach them how to fish, currently under the rules and the way they're administered, we have to get a permit to teach 50 kids how to fish.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And we don't have to pay a conservation fee. And to be fair to North Dakota Game and Fish, they give a lot of exemptions. They give a lot of permits out for things that they give exemptions or permits so you don't have to, so you can do a participation in something. But it's, why should there be exemptions for taking kids fishing? You know, and that's our viewpoint on it. And if we're looking at high school angling, parents in a town shouldn't have to get a permit to go practice on a Thursday night with 10 or 15 boats in Washburn because we have a boat ramp. We're all going to be fishing there anyway. We shouldn't have to get a permit because we're doing a high school youth activity. And so that's what that carve out is for there, or that exemption. If we're going to put 100 boats on Lake Audubon and have a high school fishing tournament, you'll notice that we still have to get a permit under this rule.
Geremy Olson is our guest, and we got to take a break from the radio show. We're going to continue this discussion on the podcast, though. So if you're listening on the radio and you want to hear more, go to sportingjournalradio.com or download the podcast wherever you get podcasts, or watch this video on YouTube. Real quick, before we transition to the podcast, Geremy, you're obviously in favor of Bill 1538. For anyone listening out there, what should they do? When do you think we might find a resolution on this? And can people, do you want people to contact their representatives? What do you want to, what's your message for people?
So right now, I'm a horrible politician. I want people to be honest and right now it's let your senators know. 10 o'clock on Thursday, the 16th is the Senate hearing for the Energy and Natural Resources Committee. And there's 6 guys there that will be taking a look at our bill and hearing our case. those guys need to hear from you if you're for or against this bill, and let them know. And then regardless if it passes that committee, it still goes to the full Senate. So let your senators know whether you're for or against House Bill 1538, and be part of the process. I think one of the hugest things on this, Brett, for me is I always thought my voice didn't matter. What I've learned in the last 2.5 months is it's absolutely amazing who will listen to you if you stand up and are honest.
I think more people need to speak up. As outdoors people here, we're terrible at it, I think, at times, because we've said this many times on the show, and we're trying to be more vocal on this show about things that matter too. And all of us just want to go out and hunt and fish, right? And just get away from it all and relax and do everything. But it's important to stand up and speak your voice if you want to continue these traditions and pass them on down to the next generation. So I appreciate you coming on and talking about this. We'll have more with Geremy Olson coming up on the podcast here on Sporting Journal Radio. Find out where you can watch or listen to the rest of this at sportingjournalradio.com.
Ice fishing season is here. This winter, plan a trip to Devils Lake, North Dakota. Not only will you have the chance to catch their legendary perch, but this year, Haybale Heights has been catching big walleye after big walleye. And they're doing it from a mobile, comfortable snow bear. No matter how cold it is outside, you're warm and toasty on the inside. Learn more and book a trip today at haybaleheights.com. That's haybaleheights.com.
Looking for winter adventure? Might as well pick a place with over 1,000 lakes. Ottertail County, Minnesota is in the middle of everywhere, offers a simpler pace, and has something for everyone. Find your inner otter at ottertaillakescountry.com.
All right, continuing here with Geremy Olson on the podcast. I want to talk a little bit about some of the people that have opposed you and opposed this bill, because there are some people out there, and what the reasons for it, and what might be in there, to appease those people. Obviously, it's all about trying to keep everybody happy, and sometimes that's impossible. But if somebody has a concern that it's going to bring a lot of attention to a lake, it's going to bring a lot of fishing pressure to a lake, because that can be a legitimate concern. When people talk about Mille Lacs, when Bassmaster went to Mille Lacs, all the locals were all up in arms about it. Oh my gosh, you're going to put a national spotlight on this world-class fishery, which Mille Lacs isn't really a secret when it comes to bass, but sure, they were definitely worried about the additional pressure that the lake was going to get, and that was a couple of years ago. So far, it seems like it's held up just fine. I don't know that personally. I don't go fish it for bass, or I don't really go fish it much at all. But when it comes to people that come up to you, it sounds like you had a bad incident at Sakakawea.
Well, yeah, I've had a handful of bad incidents in Kakawea. I've had handful of bad incidences over the phone, mostly on this bill. And part of it is the one thing that surprised me with folks that are opposed to this is when I started this whole process, I'm new to it. I don't play legislator on at all. I don't know the process. I've learned a lot in the last couple months, and part of what I started doing, just because of who I am, is I started calling the people that I knew would be opposed to it, and to give them my perspective and ask for what I'm missing. And
Sure.
And I had a handful of people that, you had to hold the phone away, and the yelling and screaming and swearing and stuff was just like, wow. I just called to ask your side of this, and so that was confusing. And that was a small number of people, 2, 3. There's definitely some people that are heated and frustrated about it. I think the biggest problem that I'm seeing is there's a lot of people that are so used to the way that it's been that they don't understand that we wrote the bill to help them. And if there's one thing that's kind of frustrating for me on this side of this is when somebody says, well, we can't lose our 10%. I'm like, but you're getting 90 more %. And so that part I don't quite understand. But the bigger frustration and the bigger part of it, and I think I don't know if this is what you were referring to, but if you've read my testimonies from before, I'm the farm kid from North Dakota that got told you have to leave North Dakota, you have to learn your trade and come home. And for 12 years of my life, I lived in Minnesota, and I came home on vacations and fished my same water that I grew up fishing. I've fished the same water I'm fishing now, and I was treated completely different because I had a Minnesota license plate on
blue plater.
Yeah, one of those evil blue platers. And what's frustrating to me is one, I guess I apologize for anybody I acted like that before I went to college, but I really wasn't part of the fishing scene, like I said. And then what's crazy now is in 2005, I fell off a fire truck and got burned and spent 3 years learning how to walk.
Oh, wow.
And it wasn't any of these guys that live on Lake Sakakawea that came and took me fishing while I was learning how to walk. It was a professional angler that came and took me fishing and got me out of the house and got me out of the wheelchair. It's some of the same professional anglers that the people are upset with now are mentors of mine, who have helped me get through and deal with the PTSD from getting burned and being a volunteer firefighter. And so I think one of the things that's tough for me and that nobody gives me credit for on this bill is I'm not pro big fishing tournament. I'm pro people that cared about me. And when you're talking about some of those bad experiences on Lake Sakakawea, is one of the most embarrassing things for me is when some friends from Minnesota came to help me through PTSD stuff, and we're out on the water and we get treated like crap and swore at because we have a Minnesota boat that's shiny from a professional angler, and then you get treated like garbage at the fish cleaning station because you're from out of state or whatever. And nobody took the time to realize that that's a group of people that spent their time and their money to come and help me. And this is the group of people that that in testimony, who's going to pay for those out of state people to come here? Who's the words buying acceptance for tournament anglers has been used multiple times. And as a North Dakota resident, I don't understand how we can accept that level of discrimination, that level of whatever those words are. It just doesn't make sense to me. And then the other part of it is fishing pressure. Here's the one that's funny is being that I'm in sound, video, and lighting production. That's how you and I know each other. I get to go out and pre-fish and shoot video with these guys for some of the national trades and different things like that. And, it's funny because everybody's worried about these guys pre-fishing and using up all their fish. Well, pro anglers with the electronics now, they go out and they pre-fish with electronics. They fish without hooks because they don't want to catch anything until the day of the tournament. They only keep what they catch for the tournament or what they're going to eat that week. And what I know is that I, as a resident of North Dakota, I'll go fill my freezer with fish, and I'm putting more stress on the fishery than any pro angler that I've ever been in a boat with working just to feed my family, because our hunting and fishing licenses come out of our grocery bill every year. And so that's the perspective I come at all this from. And it's just it's tough when somebody says that, well, you're just one of those pro anglers who wants to, fish for big money and be part of, drive around in your shiny boat. And my only question is where did I misplace the shiny boat?
Well, and I lived in North Dakota for a long time, and I definitely saw some of that, and especially in the waterfowl world, man, they do not like Minnesotans coming over. I shouldn't say they. I should say there are a few. There was definitely a lot of welcoming other hunters and residents that were very welcoming to non-residents to come over there. But you're also limited to 2 weeks to come over there to do any waterfowl hunting, and it's tough for me. And there's new regulations in Manitoba now that are going to further restrict non-residents to protect the resource for the residents. So it's a big topic right now going on in a lot of places. You look at South Dakota on the waterfowl side again. There's a draw for a lottery for a waterfowl license over there. And I tell you, we knocked on a door one time, and we were from Minnesota going to hunt in South Dakota, and the landowner was great, let us hunt his property, but he said, coming here from Minnesota, if you would have had a duck boat behind that truck, I would have told you to turn around and get out of my driveway. And, so there is some concern by local residents to make sure that their resources are protected and that they're available for those that live there, work there, pay their taxes there. And I understand all of that too, but there is the economic benefit to it. And then I see it in North Dakota too. There are a lot of people that don't like to see people make money off the outdoors. So they have, it's not even just a non-resident thing. It's just a bias against, hey, the outdoors are out here, shouldn't be exploited for this or that. But, there's a lot of benefit to fishing tournaments in the sense that it introduces a lot of people to the sport, gets people excited. I mean, it gets me excited about bass fishing.
Say what? Hold on. Rewind the tape. Say that one more time.
Because it adds an extra element to it, right? Like I grew up bass fishing, and I don't do it much anymore. But now you watch these guys on TV, and it's kind of exciting. I'd rather watch a bass tournament on TV than a football game half the time now. Now hockey's a different.
You just said that?
Hockey's different.
Holy smokes! Did hell just freeze over?
Yeah. Well, but I mean, again, it's something, and it's kind of fun, and it's kind of exciting, and yeah, there's money involved, and I know exactly what you're saying about these pros pre-fishing and not catching fish or taking the hooks off or using all their electronics. You can spot fish now so often and locate schools and on spots, and you don't have to catch them anymore to find out where the fish are. It's interesting. We recorded an interview with a Bass Elite Pro that's going to be coming up here maybe next week on this show, Pat Schlopper, and he told us a story about fishing a recent Bassmaster tournament. And there were locals there just kind of hovering around the spot that he had found fish. And he was worried, and they were there. I think they were there every day. And they were catching largemouth bass, and you can keep 10. And it was 2 guys in the boat, and they were keeping 10 largemouth every day to take home and fry up. And I couldn't believe it, because you don't hear about people keeping bass much anymore to eat, for one thing. But, it was the locals that were taking the resource, the fish out of the resource, and the tournament anglers obviously catch and release. Now, there are some tournaments where big fish get killed after the tournament, and I would like to see those tournaments go away. So there is some impact, I think. But obviously, there's definitely some pros and cons to everything. So in this bill, Geremy, to appease, that side, when you start talking about no conservation fee, which didn't always necessarily go to the resource anyway, having the ability for the local clubs to retain 100% of their proceeds from a tournament, you're saying that this is actually going to help the resources more than the previous regulations.
In the last 10 years, that 26% of tournaments that I was talking about in, I think it's an average of 2019 and 2018 is where that 26% number comes from. In the last 10 years, those tournaments would have had $780,000 that they could have chose how to spend. Wow. And as opposed to sending 10% off, and all of them are good causes. I think there's a huge word that we haven't got to talk about yet in this podcast, and that's the unintended consequences of a 40-year-old rule. And it's hurt student angling. It's been keeping the online fishing tournaments out of North Dakota for just weird reasons, mostly because people haven't caught up to the technology and what it means. But what's cool about an online tournament is you can have 50 people fish a tournament on a Saturday, and they can be at 50 different lakes. So one of our issues in North Dakota is boat ramp congestion, and an online tournament eliminates that boat ramp congestion. And so that's why we made sure that was in there. But there's another quirky thing that if you take everything that you and I've talked about today, requiring a 75% payout does 2 things. It keeps money from good causes. And keep in mind that the original rule was you had to be a charity, and not a for-profit entity could never have a tournament until like 10 or 15 years into the rules in North Dakota. but it also has required all North Dakota tournaments to have people fish for money. And what's cool is you guys are in Minnesota. My favorite tournaments, charity tournaments, is when I can go fish against somebody, and the look on my son's face the day that he got to go through a prize tent and pick up a $50 or $100 prize. He was so excited, not because he got a $50 or $100 rod and reel combo. He beat Ron Linder.
That's awesome.
He took 12th place or fifth, or he took like 5th or 6th place, but Ron took 7th. And so he's fishing for those bragging rights. You know, I'm good friends with a handful of pro guys, and I would do anything to say that I was better than Johnny Candle or Jason Mitchell or Jim Carroll today. I don't care how much money I get.
Yeah.
Because we all know, I think one of the other things that people don't realize is that if you want to make $1 million in tournament fishing, you need to start with 2. And nobody's making money tournament fishing in the U.S.
Right.
And every tournament angler I know that's making their full-time job fishing has multiple other jobs, and tournaments are just one. It's what gives them their platform. It's not where they're making their money.
Right. Yeah. They've got some other sponsorship deals, or they've got a product that they use while they're fishing. Absolutely.
So, and then one of the other unintended consequences, I think, that most people don't realize is it's been hurting our communities, you know, and it's been supporting this attitude of, this is my spot, this is my water, this is my boat ramp. And the way things have run for 40 years has promoted that. And so the goal of this bill was a handful of things. One was to open up the dollars so that we could raise more money for conservation. We could raise more money for charity, to get rid of the requirement to fish for money. The other goal of this legislation was to cut down on the administrative costs and the administrative requirements for game and fish, because our North Dakota land management agencies are underfunded. They don't have the resources or the manpower. So one of the huge thought processes into this bill is, what do we do to limit their administrative costs? And I think the number that I've heard was $40,000 that it costs to administer 133 tournaments in 2022. That's $300 a tournament. What do we need to do to get that down? And so a lot of these things that we've put into this bill were to eliminate a lot of those administrative costs, which is another unintended consequence of a 40-year-old rule.
So with these new, just the fees would go to game and fish and help offset those costs then?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. I was going to, I brought that up with Greg last week too, is talking about where the permit fees would go, and making sure that the resources are still getting protected. So the local communities are going to be able to raise funds and retain all the funds that they raise with their local tournaments to help take care of infrastructure, boat ramps, fish grinders, things like that. So you're going to have some of the local resources are still going to be protected. You're going to be able to raise money to offset some administrative fees for game and fish, and you're going to be able to introduce kids to hunting and fishing. And that's I think the biggest thing when you talk about people who oppose non-residents coming, or worried about all the added media exposure on a certain area or body of water. I mean, when you talk about Devil's Lake or Sakakawea, Missouri River, things like that, I mean, those aren't secrets. No. Those aren't, putting a tournament or putting extra media exposure on those places, it's not really going to change much. People are going to go there anyway. And, the local economies are going to benefit from additional anglers coming in, and those are fish factories. You're not going to fish out those lakes.
And North Dakota Game and Fish, I think there's 2 other things that are important for people who are weighing which side of this bill they're on. One is the North Dakota Game and Fish does a phenomenal job with our fisheries. The reality in North Dakota is our fishing pressure will never hurt our fisheries. Mother Nature is in charge. So when we have good years and bad years, 99.9% of the time, it's a Mother Nature involved thing. When walleyes are stunted and having issues, it's because of drought and flooding situations, and what happened to the food because of Mother Nature. We can have the best perch fishery in the world on a pothole someplace, and Mother Nature will winter kill that lake, and now we get to start over. It doesn't matter in the fishing pressure. So that's one. Two, we made it very clear through this entire process, and a lot of the parts of this bill that confuse people is we made sure that Game and Fish still has control of the fishery and managing tournaments. I think that's one thing that gets lost. We appreciate what Game and Fish does for managing tournaments, and the fact that if you have a family reunion tournament or something like that that's been going on for 20 years, some big company can't come in and say, hey, we want to have our tournament at this boat ramp and push you guys out because we're bigger and have more money or whatever else, which is part of that discrimination we were talking about. But we're not taking any of that away from Game and Fish. They've done a great job with that, and they need to continue to do that. And the fishery needs to be protected. That's within their jurisdictional responsibility and their mission statement for Game and Fish. And so we don't want to take any of that away from them. That's not the intent of this bill. The intent of the bill is to get rid of the limitations on monies going to conservation, charity, the limitations on high school angling, the limitations on new technology. And that's what this bill is all about.
So what about, one thing we haven't talked about is the number of tournaments that are available, because in Minnesota, they do restrict how many tournaments of certain sizes can be on a certain body of water. Depending on where you go. Is there anything like that currently? And is there any change to that in the new bill?
No, that all falls under Game and Fish. And what I think one of the frustrations that a lot of people have is there are some rules and restrictions and things that Game and Fish has that aren't public knowledge. You can only have X amount of tournaments in certain areas of Sakakawea. And that's what their job is. And so this bill does not restrict any of that whatsoever. In 2022, we only had 133 tournaments that actually happened. So we have, at the end of the day, we have a very small amount of tournaments compared to other states. I know Michigan in 2021 had 3,100 and some bass tournaments alone.
Yeah.
In the state of Michigan. That doesn't include walleye, crappie, or muskie tournaments. And so it's not, this isn't about trying to get a whole ton of tournaments. We're not trying to be Michigan or anything like that. So Game and Fish has they still have control over all of that. But at the end of the day, we statistically have way less tournaments than most places. And then here's the other fact that I didn't know until the last 3 or 4 weeks. In 2020, forgive me, I can't remember if it's 2022 or 2021. Half of the people that fished a tournament were on the ice. And so at the end of the day, we only have about 6,000 people paying, and that's not individual people, but 6,000 times somebody bought an entry fee for an on the water event, and 40% of tournaments were local tournaments with less than 50 people in that year.
So Game and Fish basically has discretion. If they say, there's already a bunch of tournaments on that lake, they could turn down an application.
Yep. And that's their job, and nobody is arguing that as part of this bill.
Okay. So that could still be in place. All right.
And I guess I was part of a charity tournament years back, and somebody came and wanted to have their tournament on our body of water the same weekend that we did, and our little charity tournament took precedence with Game and Fish, and I appreciated that then, and I still appreciate that now, that this larger tournament that wanted to come and have our date was told no. And so we totally appreciate that.
Well, it's a complicated situation, of course, but in reality, it looks like I would say from who I've heard from. I mean, I heard from a lot of people after last week's show, and it sounds like for the most part, people are in favor of this new bill, and it's just something that probably needs to be updated, and we need to be able to get more kids out on the water and introduce them to fishing. And the biggest thing is, we need as a whole, as a group of anglers or sportsmen and women, whatever, we need to find ways to limit our infighting because there's strength in numbers. And we need to ensure that we're not bickering so much amongst ourselves that something happens and an opportunity gets taken away from us. Now, I'm not going to say we all just need to get along no matter what. There's going to be some disagreements along the way, but we need to find ways. We need to find ways to work together to find amicable solutions for everybody so that we can all go out and enjoy fishing and pass it on down to the next generation. So, Geremy, is there any place if somebody wants to read up more on this or learn a little bit more about this and try to research it to make a decision to contact somebody to talk about it, what do you tell them? I
think the best thing right now, the best single source is to go to ND, the legislature, North Dakota legislature website, and look up House Bill 1538 and read all the testimony, get all the sides that are there, because that's the best place where everything's coming together. And like I said, in January when I came home from North Dakota, or from working in Florida, and I didn't know half of what I know now, and I'd been researching this for 12 years, and I'm finding out all sorts of stuff. Even this morning, I found out 5 or 6 other things that I'm like, wow, I wish somebody would have shared that. Here's a things that people don't take into consideration when we're talking about this is the frustration of the county maintenance guys that are overworked and don't have enough staff, and their job is to put boat docks or keep up with the Corps of Engineer water levels. There's a ton of frustrations and a ton of money being spent in these local communities that this money can go towards with the new bill that are positive for the local communities that are making all this work. And economic impact to a local community is huge. And because if my business is successful, then I have more money to donate to taking kids hunting and fishing, because the only reason I know how to hunt and fish is because of the guys who stepped in and filled in for my dad, who, I mean, like I said, we camped, we cooked over an open fire 12 months out of the year in North Dakota, but he couldn't catch a fish or kill an animal to save his life. So it was those guys that stepped in and helped me back then. And I want to do that for other people. And I wrote a book on how to take kids hunting and fishing, because everybody says take a kid hunting and fishing, but nobody tells the parents how. And so that's something that was passionate for me. So that's why I wrote the book that I did. And so the more that I can help people do that freely without all these barriers, then the better it is for the sport.
And that's Campfires Kids in the Outdoors, the one behind you there?
It is. So yeah, it's and the whole purpose of that is to teach adults how to take kids or new anglers or hunters in the outdoors. So
well, we'll link to that House Bill 1538 below in the comments. If you're watching this on YouTube, we'll link to it in the description here below. We'll put it on our website too. And can we buy that book online, Geremy?
Yeah, any place you want to buy a book, you can buy it online. If you want a signed copy, you have to go to shopmissouri.secrets.com.
Shop Missouri Secrets. We'll put that link below too. Geremy Olson, appreciate the time discussing all of this and helping us wade through some more layers of this issue in North Dakota. And good luck with the book, and thanks for being on the show.
Hey, thanks very much, guys.
Sporting Journal Radio is a division of Manitoba LLC. If you've got a question, comment, or story idea for us, send us an email. Go to sportingjournalradio.com. While you're there, you can learn how to advertise on the show and visit our store for hats, hoodies, coffee mugs, and more. Go to sportingjournalradio.com.